Hey everyone, welcome back to the Jay Smith Down Football Podcast. I'm your host Jaden. Here today we're to talk about the NFL, of course, and the NFL head coaching tree already has a few hires with Sean Payton and Demeco Ryans, of course, and also Tom Brady's retirement and new concussion numbers for the NFL this season that were reported by ESPN. We'll give you all that info you need to know about that. But before we get into everything, make sure you guys like us, check us out, subscribe. Y'all know the deal. Check us out here on the podcast. Please do check us out here. And also, we're on every platform you can think of. We're Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite podcast. That's where we are. So, first order of business, like I mentioned, concussions which has been a theme in the NFL for quite some time, especially as of late. Over the last couple of years, of course, the NFL has made multiple efforts to reduce head injuries, even resulting to the Guardian cap worn on the helmets during training camp. We see a lot of college teams implement that, to specific positions at quarterbacks and defensive linemen, of course, offensive linemen, that are in constant contact with other players on the field. So we've seen that implemented in the college game, but now the NFL is starting to put into place more. Like I said, they're using them in training camp, all-season programs, to reduce the number of head injuries in this game. And so the NFL releases today the concussions rose 18% from 2021, from 126 concussions to 149 concussions in 2023 and 271 games played this season. This is all per ESPN. So yes, that is a 18% increase in concussions. Obviously, this is something that is very important. In the NFL, I think, in my opinion, like with the NFL, of course, is doing what they can to reduce these head injuries. I mean, there's only so much you can do because football is a contact sport, it's a physical sport, and that's going to happen. Obviously, but you don't want to see these head injuries happen so much. Just any injuries, really, you don't want to see happen, but particularly, to the head, So, I mean, maybe there's new rules on tackling and things like that, different things. I'm sure when the NFL has their yearly offseason meeting, with all the owners and executives, they'll make determinations on that as they do about other things as well every single year. So we'll see what happens when the league has their annual meeting here in a month or so here in the offseason. But yeah, like I said, I think, it's something having played football, it's like it is a sport where, yeah, it's going to be violent, it's physical. That's part of it. That's what makes it fun. But at the same time, player safety is important as well, and that's something that we have to continue to take seriously, continue to improve our efforts to make sure that we're implementing player safety on all levels, from youth football to middle school, high school, college, and the NFL, of course, the highest level. So that is the big picture thing here. So I think that moving forward, the league is going to continue to try to do their best to prevent these things and try to help lower these numbers down. Because 149 concussions is a lot, and that's not including the ones sustained in training camp, preseason, all of that. So hopefully the league can fix that moving forward. But moving to the next segment here, of course, Tom Brady retired. Well, he supposedly retired, a couple of days ago, and yeah, February 1st, he retired. Again, a year, I have to mention this with Sheldon on the other podcast. He did this a year after he retired, last year, the same time, on the same day. But this time seemed it very sincere. He even said, I'm being for real, like, I'm retiring for good, and I'm done in the league, and I have to say this about Tom Brady. Like him, whatever you feel about him, you have to understand this guy is the greatest to ever play the game at the quarterback position, maybe arguably in whole, in general, in the game of football. What he's done, what he's accomplished, being a late round pick coming in to having replaced Drew Bledsoe, established starting quarterback in this league, and having to come in and do what he did and continue to just not, he didn't lose that starting spot from then on out, and leading New England to 6 Super Bowls, of course, and all the playoff games we all know, so the story, and then of course coming to Tampa Bay and winning the Super Bowl there. I mean, so what Tom has done has been remarkable for his career. You're happy for him. He's had a great career. Do I agree with all of his on-field antics and certain things he does? No, I don't. But a lot of people don't. Everybody's got their nicks and knacks that make them who they are. Tom has his, and like him or not, like that's you got. At the end of the day, you just have to give the man his respect, his credit. He's the greatest to ever play the game of football at quarterback. That's already been established. He's a Hall of Famer. He's broken every single record there is for quarterbacks to be broken. And at the end of the day, I got to give him props for that. So, congrats on the retirement, Tom. Again, glad we won't be seeing you twice a year in the NFC South. But here's fun mention. The Falcons again did beat Tom Brady in his last regular season game. If his retirement holds up, we'll see in like a couple weeks here because that's around the timetable that he unretired. We'll see if that holds up. But the Falcons did beat Tom Brady in his last regular season game. The Falcons. So that's something cool. That's really cool. Of course, being a Falcons fan, being based in Atlanta, to see that we finally beat Tom Brady, even though he played like a quarter and a half. But hey, it's still his team, and you beat him. So it goes down as a W in the column. So good deal there. But switching from the Tom Brady segment on into the NFL coaching carousel that we've been going through this off season, just year round like this. It's something that we always go through in the league, in the NFL. And this offseason was particularly interesting. I think more than really any other offseason because, you had a crop of a good crop of candidates for these head coaching positions. A lot of teams wanted to take that fresh step, into a new light, wanting to build a winning culture, winning franchise, wanting to establish some kind of foundation for their team. The Houston Texans being one of them, maybe probably being the most legitimate one here, and their hire of Demeco Ryans was absolutely huge. Ryans, of course, played with the Texans in his NFL career. He went to Alabama, so roll tide. But he played for the Texans. It's a linebacker, very good linebacker too. And then, of course, since he retired, he's been coaching. Was the 49ers linebackers coach most recently until he got promoted to defense coordinator after Robert Saleh left for the Jets. And he did a great job, phenomenal job leading that 49ers defense, picking up right where Saleh left off and just making them like the number one unit of defense in the National Football League, which is insane, so credit to him. And now he's bringing that mentality, that San Francisco way, that swarming defense into Houston now, which is really interesting. I find it really interesting. I think the Texans, they got a good, few good pieces here and there, some gems, but they need a lot of work, And so what he's going to be able to do is come in here and just get the best out of these guys. I think they're going to really respond well to him. He got a number one corner in Derek Stingley, future, number one corner in the league, Derek Stingley. So he drafted him that high. You're gonna look for a quarterback, most likely in the draft. I mean, that's depending on what they do. If the Bears trade the number one pick, which I'm sure they most certainly will, that's something to think about. You got the Colts up there as well in that high draft order, like the top 5 picks. So, yeah, I think for the Texans, like this is huge. Like you got to find you that franchise quarterback, and like make sure you don't ruin him. So that's the thing. That's the big thing for the Houston Texans. They've struggled with that in the past, most notably with Deshaun Watson. But that's a whole conversation for itself. But they're trying to turn the page into a new light and just trying to just reinvent the franchise. It's a hard thing to do, but just trying to make a new identity for themselves. And Demeco Ryans helps with that. You brought in the guy, you brought the head coach in. He's going to bring that mentality here. Now you got to go make the moves in free agency, in the draft, through trades, whatever you have to do. Extensions. You have to make the right moves to give your franchise, give your team the best chance to compete and win at this level. And I think Demeco Ryans is perfectly cut for that job. I think he's going to help with that extremely. Like I said, the big thing for them, I'd say get you a quarterback. Obviously, that's the number one thing. Get you another corner on the outside to go with Derek Stingley, whether it's through the draft. The draft has got a lot of good, young corners out there that will go in the later rounds, mid rounds. Talented pieces out there. Trey Dean is a guy I'm especially, excited for. I think he's really good out of Florida, University of Florida. He's a talented player. So you got a lot of players. And if you watched the East West Shrine Bowl yesterday as well, and then the Senior Bowl will be on Saturday, so a lot of talent out there this year in the draft. Specifically defense. And I think the Texans, a priority for them needs to be to attack the defensive end in the draft. Offensively, again, you got your number one running back in Dameon Pierce. You leave that alone. Again, maybe get you a solid receiver too in free agency. help out. Nico Collins is a great emerging player. I like him. What he's going to do, I think he's going to be a good receiver in this league. Maybe a number one someday. But Brandon Cooks, I'm sure is not going to return to the team, so that's something you have to factor in as well. But I like what Houston is starting to do now. As long as they can keep it right from here on, and not mess up, not make any dumb moves, then I think they are headed in the right direction. And I like what they're doing. I like the hire of Demeco Ryans to that team. I think he's going to do big things as well. So moving on though to the next coaching carousel team here, we have the Carolina Panthers hiring Frank Reich, former Eagles offensive coordinator and head coach of the Indianapolis Colts from 2018 till 2022, 4 seasons there. And like I said, um, this is an interesting hire for the Panthers. I'm not so sold on it. I really don't necessarily agree with it. Simply because of the reason that the team was playing really well under Steve Wilkes when he took over as an interim. They went 6-6. And they lost again. They need to win to really get into the playoffs. But I mean it's the Bucks and Brady eventually was going to find his way at some point. So that's that. But again, they were playing good football. They were being competitive. They were physical. They were running the football hard and aggressively. They were getting after you on defense. I mean, it's a physical, hard-working team that the Panthers have. And Steve Wilkes kind of embodied that because he's a defensive guy, first of all. So it's embodying that, kind of similar to Demeco Ryans, what he's been doing in Houston. I think, so Steve Wilkes kind of brings that mentality to the Panthers as well. I think if he was made the head coach, then that would continue on into 2023 because you have a guy that these players are familiar with. They responded to him well when he took over. The team was kind of reeling. He took over to the guys, you know what? We're going to go out here and we're going to aim, just take 1 week at a time. We're going to win each game, win each week, one week at a time, one game at a time. That's how basically he was setting things up. And the team believed in it. And, they went out and they played hard. They competed every week, every Sunday, every Thursday, and that's ultimately what you want out of your team. Of course, you want to win. You want to win the Super Bowl. You want to get to the playoffs. But when you're in a position like the Panthers are, where they have not been relevant for a number of years now, since the 2015 Super Bowl debacle with Cam Newton and all that other stuff that happened after that, they're one of those teams where they're just trying to just build their way back up. Just build their way back up into the limelight. And I think a hire like with a guy that's already in the building that's familiar with everything, like Steve Wilkes, would have been ideal for them. But they decided to go out, go outside with outside the franchise with Frank Reich, bring him in. Which I mean, and I'll say this: I'm not getting on Frank Reich. I think he's a good coach. He's got a great offensive mind. He just had to deal with a lot of quarterback issues since he's been in with the Colts. I mean, when you have a new starting quarterback every single season, that's really not good. There's no fluidity there. There's no consistency there. It's just a revolving door, and that's never good. I mean, that's like it's like at a job, right? If you're a manager and you got your specific department that cannot, everybody knows that one job, that one place where you cannot just keep anybody on that in that specific department. It's just a revolving door. You hire 3 people and they're gone within the next month, next 3 weeks maybe, depending on who they are. And it's like a constant cycle over and over again. They get tired of hiring new people because they're not going to even stay. I mean, what's the point? They don't want to put the work in. They don't want to, it's so. But the whole point of that, I say is it's a revolving door. It was a revolving door that quarterback position. I mean, since Andrew Luck retired, you had Jacoby Brissett, and, Phillip Rivers, and Carson Wentz, and Matt Ryan for this year. So that's like not you're not going to win football games with either of those guys under center, or win meaningful football games with those guys under center. Win in the playoffs with those guys under center. That's not going to happen. Now they made it to the playoffs with Phillip Rivers, but Carson Wentz, of course, blew it as he usually does late in the season. That loss to the Jags last year, and so that's kind of the story with that. Shoot, the Commanders traded for him, So but I say all that to say, man, again, at the end of the day, you got to find a quarterback. You got to find a quarterback. You got to find that cornerstone piece. And so now the Colts are doing their own head coaching search, and so, but moving back to the Panthers, I mean, it's same near, familiar situation, like could they possibly trade up in the draft with the Bears, or the Colts, right, to get to possibly get a quarterback, or the C.J. Stroud, or whoever it might be. I mean, you're gonna have the two quarterbacks they do have under contract right now are Matt Corral and I believe Jacob Eason. So Mm, you know, maybe finding a quarterback in the draft may be good for them, But then again, that just depends on how what they feel like. I don't know what Frank Reich, I don't know where he stands on that. So that's just something to keep an eye on. But from the outside looking in, the Panthers have a solid team. They do. It's talented. You got Chuba Hubbard in the backfield. He's a good back. Tommy Tremble at tight end, solid tight end. He's going to continue to grow and get better. Defensively, J.C. Horn played out of his mind this year. Great level, played high level football this season. You got Brian Burns coming off the edge. Double digit sacks. He's a tremendous pass rusher. So the Panthers have talented players. It's just going to be a matter of can they get those few more pieces in there, maybe a receiver or two, to complement DJ Moore, who is phenomenal. And again, the quarterback position. Once you figure that out, you get maybe those little pieces here and there that you just got to plug in. Like not a complete reset, but just plug and play, kind of plug and play. Some teams have the luxury of being able to plug and play, and then you got other teams who just need a complete roster overhaul, complete reset. The Panthers, fortunately for them, are not the latter, but the former. And so they're able to just plug and play. Because again, you got some talented guys and some guys that you need to retain for next season. So you need to work out a contract for them. But for the most part, they're talented. They got some talented players on that team. Physical players like Deontay Foreman at running back. He stepped up pretty huge for them this year. And so he played good, fast, hard nosed, physical football, running the ball. So he's a guy I'd like to see come back for them. Maybe that would be a good competition with him and Chuba Hubbard at the running back spot. Maybe it's a 1-2 punch kind of deal. You don't know. I don't know where Frank Reich's going to take this. But what I do know is that, it's going to be an interesting story for the Panthers, man. I really, I just don't know. I mean, right now, the way it's looking, and with the Saints too, like it's just like the NFC South is really going to be a big question mark heading into next season. You don't know what the Saints are going to do with the quarterback. I mean, Jameis Winston, I'm assuming he's going to be back. I'm not sure. Michael Thomas most likely won't be back. That's something that something to keep an eye on now. You know, I mean, for the Falcons, Desmond Ritter's the guy. Apparently, he's the guy right now. And so they still got some own kinks they got to work out. But the Panthers and the Bucks, team they're trying to establish that quarterback position. The Bucks, what are they going to do? I mean, Tom's done apparently. So what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to go Kyle Trask? Or are you going to go out and get a quarterback? So that's something to keep an eye on here. Like I said, it's interesting. But I think, again, of course, you still got teams out there looking for head coaches like the Cardinals and the Colts, of course. Um, you know, I think for the Cardinals, man, like, and they've interviewed a couple people and a couple different coaches. I think Mike Kafka was one of them, offensive coordinator for the Giants. They're going to continue to interview people, but I think that Kyler Murray's contract and his injury are a big turn off to a lot of these coaches potentially for the Cardinals. That's a word that's been kind of going around the league right now. Is that they're just not willing to deal with that, because again, he's going to be injured for a good part of 2023, the season. So you're most likely dealing with Colt McCoy at quarterback for the season. I mean, no disrespect to Colt, but you want to win. That's not how you go. And so it's a turnoff for candidates. For the Cardinals job, it's just a turnoff. After Cliff Kingsbury got fired, I mean, which is what I kept saying on this podcast. Like, they need to fire Cliff Kingsbury, or else they will not do anything at all. And they did that. Maybe a little bit too late, but they did it. Now you got to figure out what you're going to do. You got to get somebody in there who's going to be willing to take on this job, willing to take on what's going on with it, the situation going on with it, the contracts, all those things, and just be able to figure out a way to win football games and get a quarterback in here. That's what you're going to need in somebody in a head coach for the Cardinals position. And for the Colts, Jeff Saturday, who had a okay coaching debut, coaching, storyline there with the Colts this year after being named the interim after Frank Reich was fired. I mean, it's a nice story, but I mean, anything can be a nice little fairy tale, but in the end, does it actually work in reality? That's the big question. So that's what I'm looking for if they do hire him. But he is the leading top candidate. But of course, Indianapolis is going to continue to do more interviews with different candidates. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't know about Jeff Saturday, and Jim Irsay has got to get it through his noggin there that you gotta make the decision that's best for the team, and that's all I'm going to say with that. Um, and last but not least, the Broncos bringing in Sean Payton, our former adversary here in the NFC South. This is a quite arbitrocious move here. Um, I don't like it, for Sean Payton. It's not a good situation unless he feels like he can absolutely fix the offense and Russell Wilson's shortcomings from this season. Because I just don't see a situation where the Broncos really improve that much from this season to next season. Or in the future, unless they get this offense situation, Russell Wilson situation fixed, and not having your number one back. And Javante Williams also plays a role in that, but Russ didn't play that well either. Maybe it was Nathaniel Hackett's offensive scheme. Maybe it was this or that. I don't know. Maybe an offseason of training with his receivers and throwing to him to get him better, get him on page more for next season. I don't know. But it just didn't look. It looked very discombobulated and looked just dysfunctional. And that's not what you want in a franchise, and it's not a pleasing look as a franchise. And so the fact that Peyton did go there, and the Saints and Broncos agreed to that trade for because the New Orleans still technically held Sean Payton's rights, so he was still on the contract and he retired, so it would have had to be a trade, and they agreed. Them and the Broncos, they came to an agreement and they got Sean Payton in Denver. So uh, take what you will with it. I mean, I just don't like him for Sean Payton. I want him. If he's gonna be a head coach somewhere, he's a talented coach. He's a really good coach. Like he's got to be somewhere where like this situation is not gonna maybe it won't be perfect, but it's I want it to be a complete detriment to them, like completely like just not help him at all, just tear him down. Like we don't want that. You don't want that for a head coach. You don't want that for him. And he doesn't want it. So can he get this Russell Wilson situation fixed? We will see. Can he get the offense click? Can he just get this team to just be functional? The defense is elite. They got a good defense. Hopefully they can keep their defense coordinator around. Evero, who has been interviewing for head coaching candidates as well, so or in defensive coordinator positions. So it's gonna be an interesting offseason. Like I think this is one of the NFL's like most like suspicious kind of interesting offseason. You got the whole thing with Lamar Jackson going on. Like where is he gonna end up? And that's like like are they gonna franchise tag him? Is he gonna agree to that? And or is he gonna want to go somewhere else? So that's the big question there in Baltimore. And that's gonna like be a big domino effect on a lot of these teams. Aaron Rodgers, is he gonna go to the Jets? We know he possibly can get traded. Where is he gonna go? So it's a lot of things going on in the NFL right now, other than the big thing that everybody, is talking about, which is the Super Bowl. Which, as we get closer and closer to that day, I'll be giving more, picks, and we'll have more guests on here on the podcast to talk about that. There's specific key matchups for each team and how they'll fare against each other and what needs to happen for each team to get a win. So as we get closer to the day, we'll talk about that more on the Super Bowl. But make sure you guys, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for tuning in to the Jay Smith Now podcast. We love you guys. We appreciate all your help, your viewership, subscribing, everything like that. Please continue to do so. Share with your friends. Follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We're all there. Jay's Fit Down Pod. Check us out. I've been your host, Jay Gay, and thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Jay's Fit Down podcast. See you next time.